welcome to the Federal Railroad Administration's Rail Program Delivery video series. I'm Anthony Thomas, and I'm pleased to introduce Linda Martin, a Deputy Assistant Chief Counsel with the FRA.
Hello, everyone.
In this video, you'll learn about the basics of FRA's Buy America requirements.
Buy America is a statute requiring that the steel, iron, and manufactured goods used in the project be produced in the United States. Buy America applies to most FRA grants and loans. Though FRA does not have specific regulations implementing the statute, there is detailed guidance available in the form of FAQs on the FRA website.
There are a few other similar requirements that are often confused with Buy America. The first is the Buy American Act. However, Buy American usually applies to direct government procurement and a few FRA safety-related grant programs.
That's right. The Buy American Act, which has been around since 1933, requires government agencies, including FRA, to buy American-made goods when constructing or altering a public building or when buying supplies for use by its employees.
In addition, Amtrak has its own special legislation about buying domestically, called the Amtrak Domestic Buying Preference. Amtrak's buying preference is similar to the Buy American Act and requires Amtrak to procure goods that contain substantial U.S. content. However, when Amtrak is working on a project funded or financed through one of the programs for which Buy America applies, they have to follow the Buy America requirement that applies to the given project.
In addition, the Federal Transit Administration and Federal Highway Administration have different Buy America requirements than FRA. If you have questions about the differences, you can reach out to your FRA representative or look at the FAQs on our website. If you're wondering what requirements apply to your project, it's always a good idea to start by following the money. Since requirements are determined by statute or policy, you should always check to confirm that you're applying the correct requirements.
Let's get back to FRA's Buy America requirements. When should you consider Buy America for your project? You should be thinking about Buy America requirements throughout the planning and project development process to ensure compliance. If you wait until construction to consider where the steel, iron, and manufactured goods for your project will come from, your schedule and budget are likely to be inaccurate.
Considering Buy America requirements early in your planning and project development process will also help you determine if you need to seek a waiver. Waivers can take a long time to process, so the earlier you think about Buy America requirements, the better.
We'll talk more about waivers in a moment. First, let's make sure we understand the key terms and compliance requirements of Buy America. In order to understand Buy America, we need to define a few key terms first. They are subcomponents, components, end products, manufacturing, and final assembly. We'll use examples along the way to illustrate these different elements and processes.
Let's start with the smallest part of any rail project, a subcomponent. A subcomponent is a small part that combines with other small parts during the manufacturing process to form a bigger part called a component. For example, in a rail car project, a cushion in a passenger seat would be a subcomponent. In a rail turnout project, a crank or gear would also be an example of a subcomponent.
Subcomponents come together to form components. A component is a unique part that, when combined with other components during final assembly or further manufacturing, forms a finished end product. In the railcar project, each passenger seat is a component. In the turnout project, a switch stand is one component.
Always check with your FRA contact if you have a project-specific question about differentiating between components and subcomponents. The FRA's website also has a list of typical components for railcar projects as a reference tool.
Next comes the end product. The end product is what we're left with after buying materials and assembling or manufacturing them into a desired product. An end product could be a passenger rail car, a railroad track, or a railroad signal. All of these end products are made up of multiple components, and the components are made up of multiple subcomponents. Most projects have one or more end products, but many components and even more subcomponents.
When a subcomponent, like a controller, is turned into a component, like a track circuit, the change occurs through the manufacturing process. Manufacturing is the application of processes that substantially transform and add value to components or subcomponents in order to create a functionally different product.
In our railcar example, the cushion subcomponents are combined with other subcomponents to form component seats through the manufacturing process. Likewise, wires and controllers are manufactured into track circuits in the turnout project.
Manufacturing also occurs when we create most end products. The component becomes part of the end product through additional manufacturing that often occurs on site. In a turnout project, the track circuit becomes part of the interlocking through on-site manufacturing.
Lastly, we have final assembly. Final assembly refers to creating an end product from multiple components through the application of manufacturing processes. For example, a railcar is finally assembled from multiple components, like seats, windows, and wheels, into a final end product.
The distinction is not always clear, but final assembly is different from manufacturing in that final assembly usually involves more simple activities such as bolting or connecting individual elements.
Now that we have gone through some of the key Buy America terms, let's talk about how all of this applies to your rail project.
All components, end products, manufacturing, and final assembly must come from or occur in the U.S. It is the site of the manufacture that matters, not the nationality of the company doing the manufacturing.
That means that if a French company manufactures components and end products at a site in Denver, they meet FRA's Buy America requirements. But if an American company has a manufacturing site in Argentina and intends to manufacture components at that site for an FRA project, they would not meet the requirements of Buy America. Okay, so we've learned that components and end products need to be US made, with manufacturing and final assembly occurring in the US. What about subcomponents? Do those need to be American made as well?
Subcomponents do not need to be made from U.S. materials, nor do they need to be produced in the U.S. For example, in a traffic signal system, the wires and controllers that come together to form the track circuits can be from a foreign company and can be manufactured outside the U.S. That being said, it's always a good idea to use domestic products. The goal is American jobs.
FRA has additional Buy America requirements for the steel and iron used to manufacture the following types of manufactured goods: railcar systems and components, including items such as steel car shells, wheels, and grab irons; structural construction materials, including items such as steel or iron beams and columns, and bridge trusses; and steel track work used in track projects, including items such as running rail, contact rail, and switch rails. If you're using iron or steel for subcomponents, or if they are being used in non-structural manufacturing, regular Buy America rules apply.
Projects using steel and iron receive extra scrutiny. When planning for your project, be sure to think about every steel and iron part and whether or not the extra steel and iron requirements apply. For example, you might need to pay extra attention to car shells, iron handholds, rail ties, or structural steel in a building or bridge.
Now that we've built up our understanding of FRA's requirements for Buy America, let's talk a bit about compliance and the roles and responsibilities of the FRA and the grantee.
In order to comply with Buy America, grantees and loan recipients need to ensure that the design, detailing, and specification of materials and manufactured end products and components are done with domestic sourcing in mind. This means that grantees and loan recipients should include provisions in all procurement contracts and requests for proposals to ensure that the applicable requirements flow down to suppliers, contractors, and subcontractors.
So that means that all producers, suppliers, contractors, and anyone else involved in the process must adhere to Buy America's requirements. FRA recommends that grantees and loan recipients obtain signed certifications from suppliers and contractors indicating that they will comply with Buy America requirements. Grantees and loan recipients are responsible for reviewing proposals to verify that the iron, steel, and manufactured products will be manufactured in the United States. They also must keep a watchful eye for violations as their projects are being constructed and conduct audits as appropriate for their individual projects.
The FRA performs oversight to ensure that projects meet the Buy America requirements. If you're curious about how oversight works, check out the monitoring procedures for Buy America.
Now, let's talk about Buy America waivers.
There are 4 conditions under which the FRA may grant a waiver from the Buy America requirements. A waiver may be granted if complying with the terms of Buy America would be inconsistent with the public interest, if U.S. goods are not produced in sufficient quantity or quality to meet project needs, if rolling stock or powertrain equipment cannot be bought and delivered in the U.S. within a reasonable time frame, or if including domestic material will increase the cost of the overall project by more than 25%.
FRA strictly scrutinizes waivers and grants them on a case-by-case basis. Before granting a waiver, FRA expects the requester to have made every effort to find domestic sources. FRA verifies all assertions made in waiver requests to ensure that the conditions for granting a waiver are met. There are no blanket standing waivers for particular materials or components.
In reality, the likelihood of getting a waiver is very low. Visit FRA's Buy America website to view all of the waivers that the FRA has granted in the past.
You certainly should not count on receiving a waiver for your project. If you do apply for a waiver, you should submit your detailed justification in writing, along with supporting documentation to the FRA administrator. You should apply as soon as you know you're going to need one. The earlier, the better.
The waiver request process can take anywhere from 3 months to 1 year, so don't make the mistake of waiting until you're ready to start construction to apply for a waiver. This can seriously slow down your project as you wait for the waiver process to be completed.
If you have questions about whether or not to apply for a waiver, you should start by looking at the FAQs on our website, where there is a great deal of information related to waivers. If you cannot find the answer to your question in the FAQs, you should get in touch with your FRA contact. That was a lot of information. Let's take a moment to review some of it by going through a quick quiz. Question 1. True or false? Buy America and Buy American have the same requirements.
False. Buy American applies to public use projects and only certain FRA projects. Buy America applies to most FRA grants and loans, including projects authorized by the Passenger Rail Investment and Improvement Act and Tiger grants. In addition, Buy America requires that the steel, iron, and manufactured products used in a project be made in America, while Buy American requires goods to be from substantially U.S.-made materials.
Question 2. Your agency just received Tiger funding to build a new passing track for your railroad. Which of the following items would need to be produced in the U.S. according to Buy America requirements? A turnout, a frog, a crank and a switch throw, and a steel rail.
To answer this question, we first need to identify whether these items are subcomponents, components, or end products. The turnout is one of the end products of the project. End products need to be manufactured in the United States according to the Buy America requirements. The frog is a component of the turnout. Components also must be manufactured in the United States. The crank is a subcomponent of the switch throw in the turnout. Subcomponents do not need to be produced domestically. Finally, the steel rail is a component of the tracks, so it must be sourced domestically. In addition, since we are talking about steel for a track, the steel itself must be produced in the United States.
Question 3. What should you do if you aren't sure if an element of your project is a subcomponent or a component?
First, if you're working on a railcar project, you can refer to the public list of components available at the link on your screen. Remember, anything that is used to create one of the components would be a subcomponent. If you're not working on a railcar project or are still not sure what's what, contact your FRA representative.
Question 4. True or false? If you can prove that a resource is not produced in sufficient quantity domestically, the FRA will issue a blanket waiver for that good.
False. There are no blanket waivers under FRA's Buy America. The FRA examines every waiver individually.
Question 5. What makes steel and iron unique in the Buy America requirements?
FRA has additional Buy America requirements for the steel and iron used to manufacture railcar systems and components made primarily of steel, structural construction materials, and steel track work used in track projects. Following Buy America requirements helps support American jobs. By using the information provided in this video, you should be able to comply with FRA's Buy America requirements.
For more information about Buy America, please visit the following web pages. Thank you.